the next few minutes, I'm going to try and convince you that why a basic knowledge of probability and statistics is important in being a good citizen, becoming a better reader of the news, and also being able to use that knowledge to detect some of the bizarre or outrageous claims people make. And I'm going to do that with 3 examples. Example number 1. In 2002, there was a local election, and 3 candidates had 18,181 votes exactly. Now, the national media reported this, but there was no investigation or anything, and everything just went on. Whereas if you try to calculate the probability of this happening, and it's not that difficult to do that. You can actually do this with very, very simple probability, what you take probably a course at TLU. What you do, you set aside those who vote straight Democratic or Republican. That leaves you a certain number of voters. In this case, for example, maybe 5,000, 6,000. And then determine the probability of the 3 people having exactly the same number of votes. If you do that, you will notice that if we had 10 races going on, the probability would have been about 5 in a million. Now, that is possible, but not probable. What happened? It wasn't fraud. I don't think anything fishy was going on. What happened, the county was using, for the first time, these sort of electronic scans, optical scans that was very new, and probably they didn't initialize the machines properly. And, but I think the reason there was no investigation, because these 3 would have won anyway. It's just that they shouldn't have had the same number of votes. The second example is about Olympics, 1988. Most of you probably don't remember that Olympic, but it was a very strange Olympics. In track and field, we had really, really outrageously good results. If you look at the numbers I have there, those are the number of people, athletes, that could have won 16 years later with the same record. You notice from 1960 to, for example, 1976, only 2 could have won. Whereas 1988, 16 years later in Athens, half of the people who won gold in track and field would have won gold in Athens. Obviously, something was wrong. One of my students, Michelle Johnson, last summer helped me to model the way the Olympic records changed throughout the years. You start with 1960 and you use an exponential model. And by doing that, we could determine approximately at least what the record should have been. If you look at that chart, just look at the discus, women discus throw. The person who won that had approximately 72 meters, whereas our predicted record was 63 meters. The 2004, the person who won had 67 meters, about 5 meters less than 72. That means it will take another 30 years for somebody to have that 72 meters again. So clearly, something strange happened. We can calculate the probability of this also, and depending on the kind of assumptions you make, the probability could be about 0.11% to about 0.26 to 26%, which is very, very small. What happened here? Most people think it was doping. And the Olympic Committee, as a matter of fact, started this anti-doping agency after that Olympic, and suddenly all the records started being normal. And as I said, it will take many, many years for us to get to where those records were. The last example, a story in Newsweek. Again, some of you might remember this was the second Persian Gulf War when US invaded Iraq. If you know, the president/dictator of Iraq was in hiding, Saddam Hussein, and his 2 sons were running for their lives. And at some point, a greedy relative gave him up. I think there was a bounty of $5 million, $10 million or something. So anyway, the 2 sons were killed, and also their teenage son. So there were 2 grown men and 1 14-year-old. Now, that's, of course, a story, but what is probably bigger, and maybe a lot of people will not notice, if you look at that story there, it says that they found $100 million in that place that these people were staying. Now, what is wrong with that number, 100 million? Now, if you think about it, even if these were all in 100 American dollar bills, which probably weren't, probably it was Iraqi money, but let's just say they were all $100 bills. Every bill is about 1 gram. Now, if you weigh this 100 million, it's about 2,200 pounds. That's as big as a car. So imagine 2 men and a teenager carrying a car on their back with American soldiers chasing them. Now, that is impossible. So what happened? A reporter was in a hurry to be the first person to record this, asked somebody, okay, what happened? How much money was there? So, oh, it was a lot of money, 100 million. And they just wrote it down, and nobody bothered to check that. It was probably more like 100,000 or something like that. Okay? All right, thank you.